HTC. Even though HTC didn't sell phones under its own name until 2006, it was already a significant player in the Windows mobile market, with handsets often turning up with carrier branding or under the iMate name. The HTC Blue Angel sold under various names, including the T-Mobile MDA3 and the O2 XDA2S. O2's original XDA was probably the first widely available touchscreen Windows smartphone, launched the previous year and then followed by the XDA2. This device had a 3.5-inch QVGA touchscreen and Wi-Fi, but the main addition was the slide-out QWERTY keyboard. A more traditional design, the HTC Typhoon sold under different names, including the Orange SPV C500 and T-Mobile SDA. Despite running Windows, the Typhoon was quite a basic device, but at 100 grams in weight, the Typhoon was much lighter than other Windows smartphones. Another device on the market was the HTC Magician, sold as the T-Mobile MDA Compact and under other names. The Magician was a reasonably successful attempt to get a more pocket-sized touchscreen phone, even though it had to compromise on features. Sharp. Remember Sharp? 2004 was probably their best year in Europe, with a number of class-leading devices. Despite being ahead of the pack, Sharp never made the breakthrough it needed in Europe, and eventually it faded from view. The first phone to break the 1-megapixel camera barrier, the Sharp GX30 also had a 2.2-inch QVGA display, better than almost all the competition, plus Bluetooth and an SD card slot. The catch was that you had to be a Vodafone customer to get one. Sharp went several better with the Sharp 902, again exclusive to Vodafone. This was one of the launch devices for Vodafone's 3G network, and this came with the first 2-megapixel camera and a 2.4-inch QVGA swiveling display. As with other Sharp devices, the display technology took advantage of Sharp's expertise in LCDs. Although the 902 should have been a world beater, it was very expensive, and interest in 3G networks didn't really materialize until sometime after the 902 was obsolete. Unlike the 902, the Sharp GX25 was very successful. Again, Sharp squeezed in a QVGA display and Bluetooth in a very compact package weighing just 90 grams. The GX25 still manages to look quite contemporary, even all these years later. Siemens. Once a major player in the European market, Siemens has almost been forgotten now, but it did manage to come up with some innovative devices. There is now a small but significant market segment for tough phones, and the Siemens M65 was one of the earliest examples. With a rubber case that was water, shock and dust resistant, the M65 was the sort of thing that could survive a bit of rough treatment. Something that never caught on was the design of the Siemens SK65. It tried to answer the perennial problem of how to fit a QWERTY keyboard in an unusual way. The keyboard rotated out from behind to form a cross shape. Too radical for consumers, the Siemens brand was never very popular with corporate customers either, leading to the SK65 being a very rare device these days. Other manufacturers. Most large mobile phone companies manage to make the occasional iconic or standout device in design terms. Samsung is one of those companies that seems to struggle with this, but perhaps one of the most fondly remembered is the Samsung D500 slider. A cute slider with a decent camera, and one of the first Samsungs to support Bluetooth, the D500 was a huge sales success. Probably the company with the most turbulent history in this industry that we know of is Palm. Back in 2004, it was known as Palm One. Palm One had badly miscalculated the smartphone market and was stuck making standalone PDAs, which it was becoming apparent was a dead-end market. To get round this, it bought a small manufacturer of Palmos-based smartphones called Handspring, and with it their Trio line of phones. The Palm One Trio 650 was the first in-house design, and although it was never a huge sales success, it was enough to keep Palm One in business and kept Palm fans happy. Most Japanese phone manufacturers, apart from Sony, no longer have a significant presence in Europe. but Sanyo probably has one of the shortest histories. An attempt to break into the new 3G market with the Sanyo S750 met with a remarkable lack of success. Although the hardware specification was competitive with rivals, the build quality was questionable and the phone looked a complete mess. Sanyo fixed many of these shortcomings with an upgraded version in 2005, but by then it was too late and they pulled out of the market. Another Japanese manufacturer that pulled out of Europe, Panasonic, were getting increasingly uncompetitive by 2004. The Panasonic X300 is one good example. The X300 had a basic flip-out display, just like a modern digital camcorder, and it was indeed capable of recording video on its basic camera. But there was hardly any internal storage, and getting videos off the phone was very difficult. Although there were many other equally poor devices on the market, the flip-out screen raised expectations that the X300 simply could not match. French manufacturer Sagem showed promise in 2004, the Sagem MyC 3B being the most memorable device in design terms. For many years Sagem continued to make cheap and cheerful devices, but recently the brand vanished, and what was Sagem Mobile now makes OEM devices for other companies. Yet another defunct manufacturer that once showed promise was UK-based Sendo. The cheap but highly usable Sendo P600 was the sort of thing that should have given them a boost. Popular at the time, mostly because of the low cost, Sendo devices like this were often seen, but are now mostly forgotten. Sendo's R&D team were snapped up by Motorola, but sadly Motorola closed the division a couple of years later. NEC were a pioneer of 3G handsets in Europe, and the NEC E228 was a popular model in that market, but also one of the last phones that NEC would make for Europe. An inexpensive device, it still had video calling and an expandable memory, but most Hutchison 3 customers would never use those features. NEC was another Japanese manufacturer to leave the market, this time in 2006. A manufacturer that's done rather well since 2004 is LG. Most notably, LG made U-series devices for 3. Early 3G handsets such as the LG U8130 lacked what we would regard as the basics of Bluetooth and expandable memory, but they could access 3's walled garden and make video calls. Of course, these days most users want unrestricted web access and multimedia on their memory card and don't care much about video calls, so perhaps it's not surprising that few people really wanted to use 3G when it came out. In context, quite a lot of companies demonstrated that they had real vision in 2004, with 3G devices and touchscreen phones pushing technological boundaries, although there was no real interest from customers. Fashion phones did rather better, and many manufacturers pulled back from their high-tech offerings, which proved to be a mistake in the long run.